Welcome back to the Stage Blank podcast. My name is Sukhman and I'm joined by Michael Vickers from Brampton Arts Organization. And today's topic is all about why is it important to support artists. So let's get things started. So Michael, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do and what BOW does.
For sure. Well, hi everyone. I'm Michael Vickers. I'm an artist. I do sculpture and painting, installation, a whole bunch of different sort of creative projects.
Mhm.
I'm also executive director of the Brampton Arts Organization, or
Mhm.
BOW, which is an organization here in Brampton that really works to support the local arts and culture sector,
Mhm.
whether you're an individual artist or an organization. We're here to be that sort of like helping hand, whether it's supporting financially, training, resourcing, showcasing, really just like here to lift up the creative community in Brampton.
Perfect. So before I dive deep into what BOW does and your role at BOW, I want to know what you do. So
Yeah.
your role as an artist and how did you get into art?
Yeah, I've always been an artist. Like something I really like about BOW is
Mhm.
just that everyone that is on our team is an artist across different disciplines, so we can
Uh-huh.
each bring that sort of perspective. And I think it's been part of my career in the arts has always been dedicated to just wanting to support other artists.
Mhm.
So having that actual lived experience of like applying for grants and not getting them, or that
Uh-huh.
excitement of getting an opportunity or an
Uh-huh.
exhibition, right? Like knowing what that's like, I think makes me a better sort of leader. I've always been into art. When I was a kid, I was the person on the playground, like making drawings and trying to sell them to other kids. And like, I've always had that sort of mindset.
I see.
So even from a really young age, I was like drawing, painting. That was
Mhm.
always what I was into. And that sort of always stayed with me. I did my undergrad in visual art and also in media communication. My master's is in art history. And then, yeah, I've always had a job sort of in the arts as
Uh-huh.
well. And I kind of almost consider that part of my artistic practice now is like building up artistic communities. And it's almost like
Mhm.
part of, if it can be, sort of part of my own practice in a way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So how hard was it to get the foot into the artist industry or just to get that first job as an artist?
Yeah. I think you just have to be willing to put yourself out there and to jump in wherever help is needed, right? Like I think
Mhm.
sometimes, and I think this applies to sort of any industry, right? But people maybe imagine like, oh, well, right away I want to be at XYZ level.
Yeah.
And I did plenty of volunteering, plenty of
Mhm.
interning, plenty of like working part-time while doing another job.
Mhm.
And I think that that's just part of
Mhm.
it. So for me, I'd say like advice would be just like looking at maybe where you'd like to be,
Mhm.
and that almost matters more than what the specific job is. And then how do you sort of get a foot in the door by again helping out, and then maybe that becomes a part-time position, then that
Mhm.
becomes full-time. So I think that's the number one thing is just like, where's your dream
Mhm.
job? You know what I mean? So say you want to work for a record label, if it is like, oh, Universal is where you want to be, what does it look like to get your foot in the door in their office in
Uh-huh.
Toronto? Is there a room for internships? Do they do placements? Even if you really have a specific area that you want to be in,
Mhm.
just sort of like being proactive, going for coffees with people, right? Like going for coffee
Definitely.
dates and just asking for information, and through that, right? Even if they're not the right person, they might say, "Oh, well, I know who you should speak to. It
Uh-huh.
should be this person." And so,
Definitely.
yeah, a lot of like hustling,
Mhm.
and patience, and having other gigs at the same time for
Yeah.
for a chunk of it as well, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I've tried to always sort of work within the art still.
Mhm.
Sort of like if you want to be in a successful band, um, it's useful to go work at a record label to know what it's like on the other side
Definitely.
of things. And
Mhm.
as an artist, I worked a lot in galleries and museums, and it was sort of that as well, right? Being on the other end of things to know how your art is received, or what they're looking for.
Mhm. Definitely. So you have to put the hours in, you have to work for it, and obviously networking is definitely the crucial part of being an artist.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think like networking is the number one thing in any sort of industry, but
Mhm.
especially in the arts, which is just like such a community.
Mhm.
And that's the beautiful thing about it too, right? Is just
Mhm.
that like you never know where a conversation or a relationship can go. I'm still connected to people that I went to school with that are off doing different things, but
Uh-huh.
then that sort of 6 degrees of separation, I think,
Mhm.
especially within the art world, is very connected.
Yeah, that's what I noticed too. I think artists just have more of a collaborative nature rather than being competitive. I
Yeah.
like that about being, an artist itself. And even when I opened Stage Blank, I think you were the first one that reached out to me saying that, "Oh, come and speak at the town hall." And I was like, that's a great opportunity. I don't want to miss it. So
Yeah.
just like there's less competition, more like a collaborative nature.
I
You
think
just need to,
certainly
yeah.
within like the successful organizations, right? Like
Right.
I think having that sort of competitive
Mm-hmm.
energy, maybe it would work in the very short term, but
Definitely.
eventually, if
Mm-hmm.
you want that sustainability,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's for your own artist career or for an organization, it's just like
Mm-hmm.
stronger together. And I think within the arts, sometimes that comes from a natural, just like a
Mm-hmm.
need, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, we can't both afford a PA system, so let's
Definitely.
share one. But
Uh-huh.
again, like the good things that come from that rather
Mm-hmm.
than like, okay, let's work together to put on this show and we can both get some stage time and both access
Uh-huh.
things. And then next thing you know, you're collaborating
Mm-hmm.
through our conversations, right?
Yeah.
You then access funding and you
Mm-hmm.
never know what can come from it.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree that within the arts, there's just more of that spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, do you still paint? Do you still do your? Or
I do for
yeah.
sure. So I have two young kids and an
Uh-huh.
amazing wife at home, and so I find it harder to put on like my artist hat. Like I'm
Yeah.
always talking about, I have my like
Uh,
work hats, and then I have my own artist hat. I have my dad hat. I have my husband hat. So the artist hat, I don't get the chance to put on as often as like, but I do for sure. I
mhm.
just did a project with the city of Hamilton.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I'm still making sure that
That's good.
it doesn't fade away, and I don't think it ever could. But
That's
yeah,
good.
so it's still there for
It's still
sure.
there. So I ask this question to everybody that comes on here. What's the hardest thing about being an artist?
I think the hardest thing about being an artist, uh, like my mind, I'm just a positive person. I'm like, well, let's talk about all the amazing things about being an artist first. Like, isn't it amazing to be? So I will. Let's talk. Isn't it amazing to be part of this community? Isn't it
Definitely.
amazing to create something,
Mhm.
to share that with other people, to make something that maybe feels super personal, and then you share it with
Mhm.
somebody else, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I felt like, or
Uh-huh.
that's exactly what I saw in that
Mhm.
moment, or whatever, right? Like, isn't that one of the most amazing things where something that
Mhm.
feels so personal is
Definitely.
actually super shared? uh and just like the joy of being in that sort of flow state of making
The
art is one of the
self-fulfillment
best
and all that.
things. So when
Yeah.
you're like get lost in
Mhm.
making something and you forget, oh my god, it's been 5 hours. How has it been
Uh-huh.
5 hours? It feels like I've only been here
Yeah.
for an hour. Like
Definitely.
those are one of the most amazing things. One of the hardest parts, I think, can just be like anything. Rejection probably is the hardest,
Uh-huh.
right? When you put in all that time and you're in
Uh-huh.
that flow state and you're making this amazing thing, and then somebody's like, we regret to inform you that
Yeah.
unfortunately you were not selected for X,
Uh-huh.
Y, Z, right? And I
Uh-huh.
think that is always going to be
Uh-huh.
difficult.
Mhm.
But I think again, with time, the more practice,
Mhm.
and the more understanding of that, that you're not going to get everything you apply for. So I'd say that probably the hardest part though is when you think, it's hard not to apply for something and start daydreaming. Well, what if I
Uh-huh.
get, we've all done that, right? What if I get that job and how, and you start kind of like storytelling, and then to not get it. But I think you have to be, willing to sort of pick yourself up pretty quickly and move on and like
Definitely.
keep applying, right? I think the worst thing that can happen is that you get rejection and then
Try
you
again.
just take that as like, oh well, the project's not good or it's not.
Mhm.
It's like the reality is super competitive and
Mhm.
doesn't mean your idea isn't great or
Mhm.
amazing. It's just that there's only so many opportunities out there,
Definitely. Mhm.
yeah.
I see. Okay. So a lot of people usually sway away from being an artist, I would say, because of the financial reasons too. Like, I don't know if it's a misconception.
Yeah.
Even I have it, I would say,
Yeah.
that it's not easy to make money as an artist. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people have that misconception. Maybe that's why a lot of people after high school, they want to do something that is not art related.
Yeah.
So, what's your message regarding this? How can we push people towards being an artist and not leaving the art behind or their creative nature
Yeah.
because of just financial reasons?
Well, I think what I would say is probably like, now I feel like I'm looking at the camera, like you can run from your creativity, but you can't hide from it and it's going to catch up to you, right? So I know plenty
That's
of
great.
people too that say, oh,
Uh,
well, I don't want to do that. And
uh,
it doesn't make any money. And then they end up coming back to it. I've met tons of artists that were
uh-huh.
like, I was a lawyer until X,
That's me.
Y, Z, you're
That's
a
what I'm
lawyer.
doing.
And then, but eventually, and you're fulfilling your creative self here
That's
and you're
what it is.
scratching that itch.
You're
But a lot
right.
of people that don't, that kind of push that down,
Uh-huh.
eventually hit a point where it bubbles back up to the surface.
Right.
And then like,
Hmm.
regrets and all these other
Uh-huh.
things, right? So even if you're not, 100% of your time isn't devoted to being an artist, not at least letting that some of that
Hmm.
self come through, um, yeah, I think is a mistake. And I think the reality is that, maybe this idea of an artist can be, when people think, oh, artists don't make money, are you picturing just sort of like the Van Gogh character who's
Uh-huh.
struggling, who's, like a lot of these sort of the idea or the myth of the artist is this sort of character who's like down
Mhm.
on their luck, isn't having any success,
Mhm.
maybe has addiction or mental health issues. Like that sort of idea that often is romanticized of an artist is really not a very healthy or accurate one, right? Like
Mhm.
an artist can also be somebody who's working on a set for Netflix,
Mhm.
building amazing things,
Right.
getting paid a ton of money. You could be doing storyboarding for a film and making a ton of money. Like I think
Mhm.
broadening that idea of what an artist is super
Uh-huh.
important too, right? You could be a musician who, yeah, maybe you have a band, but you're also making a great living
Oh.
doing scoring for films or whatever. So I'd say just first off that like, it's you need to think a bit bigger picture if you're thinking that artists don't make money and what that
Mhm.
means. Um, yeah.
Understood.
And I think you kind of have to get to the parents really. Like often that's generational,
I was
right?
just gonna touch upon that, like at least in our culture,
Hmm.
like you're either a medical doctor, you go into this field, that field. Art is considered as a hobby and never as
Yeah.
a career. I'm not sure how it goes for even your parents. Were they supportive? Were they
Yeah.
like,
I think not as supportive as they could have been, like I think, but it's hard, right? And I think
yeah,
often for parents that comes from a place of like love, right?
uh-huh,
Like they worry for you and they want you to have a good life and they
uh-huh,
want you to be comfortable and they want you to not have to worry. I think it is different for the newcomer experience.
mhm,
When I first started working in Brampton, I thought, oh, I get the impression that for a lot of folks that are new to Canada, they have this pressure to be an engineer, a
mhm,
doctor, a
yep,
lawyer, like these quote unquote more sort of like high paying,
mhm,
stable sort of jobs. And I wondered, is that just a misconception? Is that but speaking to folks like, no, that's the reality. Is like as a first generation Canadian, like I'm
yeah,
really feeling that from my
uh-huh,
parents. And so again, some of the work that I've done is like connecting with parents and being like,
mhm,
actually, your son could be doing X, Y, Z, and here are the
mhm,
ways that we could support them and build them up.
mhm,
Um, so yeah, I experienced some of that, but I think also my parents recognized that I was going to do what I wanted to do anyways, right?
I see,
But I struggled with that too. Like I had
uh-huh,
a teacher in high school who was just like a jaded high school art teacher who
uh-huh,
said like, don't go into the arts. There's no money in the arts.
uh-huh,
So I went to school for journalism after
uh-huh,
that. But then after a year, was back in the art studios. You know what I
uh-huh.
mean? Again, that sort of idea of like you can
yeah,
run from it,
you
but I
can,
naturally was just like, no, I'm going to do
mhm,
that. And I did a double major in visual art, but also in media communication. So it's like, okay, well, I still have that other backup or that second sort of career option. Again, we spoke already about like the
mhm,
overlapping between like media
yep,
and fine art. Um, yeah, but I think you kind of just have to persevere. But
mhm.
again, it can be really difficult if you have folks that are trying to sway you one way or another.
Yeah. It
But
definitely starts with the parents, I think, or at school as well.
yeah,
School and parents is where you either make it as an artist or you lose that creativity fully. You just,
totally right. And I think
yeah.
again, there's just so many
Uh-huh.
layers to it, right? Like if you're an artist whose parents don't want you to be
Uh-huh.
an artist, they want you to be something else, it's because actually they wanted to be an artist and their parents didn't give them that opportunity,
Uh-huh.
right? And like again, it can kind of there
Mhm.
can be many layers to that sort of
Mhm.
like complicated onion. But I think you know
Mhm.
yeah, there are ways to sort of be an
Definitely.
artist and have a wonderful, fulfilling,
Life.
comfortable,
Mhm.
wealthy life too.
Definitely. So getting back into Bao now. So where does Bao fit in, like in terms of supporting art? Let's say a newcomer comes to Canada, they were artists back home.
Yeah.
They come to Brampton, they buy a house here, and they want to get started. They
Hmm.
want to still be an artist here in Brampton.
For
How
sure.
could they get started specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, the beautiful thing with Bow is there are just so many entry points. So I guess sort of like a history of Brampton Arts Organization would just
Mm,
be that Brampton, a massive city, 800,000 people, so many amazing things going on, so many folks from across the world that come here,
mhm,
and it is like that landing point for many. But didn't have an arts council, which is sort of
right.
wild, right? For a city of this size,
Mhm,
how is there no organization that was really dedicated to supporting the
mhm,
arts? And that's sort of where we came in. I was hired by the city of Brampton to basically build a new organization to sort of
mhm,
fill that gap. And so now, if you are somebody who's new to the country, we have a specific program called the Newcomer Creative Exchange, where folks can come in,
okay.
participate in programming for newcomers by newcomers. Like
Uh-huh,
that's a big part of everything that we sort of do at Bow is sort of that nothing about us without us,
uh-huh,
And so our Indigenous programming is led by Indigenous folks for
mhm,
Indigenous folks. If we have a filmmaker program, like our film showcase coming up, again, it's filmmakers that are planning that and,
yeah,
and organizing it. So I'd say for Bao, though, there are tons of paid opportunities, tons
Mm-hmm.
of ways to connect as a community. Again, what we spoke about earlier, that coming together, because I think that's the entry point
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of folks is like, I just want to meet other artists.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have open studio days. I could kind of go on and on, but if you just go to our website, bramptonartsorg.ca, or just check us out at BAO Brampton,
Mm-hmm.
you can find more information, or just email us like
Yeah.
all the time. But yeah, free studios, free yeah, programming. Everything we do is free and completely open to the public. So I think the number one thing I always tell people is just like come out to something
Definitely.
and then get the process started. It's one thing to kind of hear about Brampton Arts Organization or
Mm-hmm.
hear about BOW. It's
Yeah.
another to like come to our space, meet with people,
Definitely.
be at an event, and then get the vibe for things a little bit.
That's how I started. Like town hall is like I think a really good way to get. Is it quarterly, monthly, or how
Yeah,
does it
so we
go?
do those quarterly.
Quarterly, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
That's actually
mean,
a good way to start. Like anyone that can come there, it's like you feel the vibe is good. Everybody's
for
inviting,
sure.
having fun.
And you can ask questions,
Yeah,
right? And like
definitely.
that's a big part of the
Mm-hmm.
organization that we've built together too, is just that like there's tons of room for community input. So we do quarterly town halls where people can
Mm-hmm.
come, ask us questions, ask the city and other
Yeah.
guests questions
Mm-hmm.
about what they're working on. We have a community advisory group, so a group of community members that inform the work that we're doing. We have an artist advisory group where local artists inform the work that we do.
Yeah.
So really involving the community in
Mm-hmm.
what we're building for them, because
Yeah.
there's no sense in me just sort of like daydreaming about things if actually folks on the ground here in Brampton are like, that's
Mm-hmm.
not quite hitting the mark, you
Definitely.
know?
I'm actually part of the art. It's just like I think 6, 7 months I was introduced before to the BOW. I've been part of the BOW and WIC membership,
Yeah.
artist advisory board, town hall. I've been there,
Yeah.
and I was recently invited to look at the residency studios. I saw you there as well with
Yeah.
other artists there. But I think there's a lot going on. There's a lot of
Amazing, right?
things.
So that
Yeah,
sort of shows that in a few months
yeah.
of coming,
So
after you
many
come to a
things.
town hall
Yeah,
and suddenly you're getting funding from the city
opportunities,
of
fun.
Brampton,
Yeah.
connections,
Mm-hmm.
different opportunities, mentorship programs.
Yeah.
But again, that also takes, credit to you for that initiative, right? Where you
Definitely.
could also say, oh, well, I'm too busy or I'm too
Mm-hmm.
da-da, but you're like putting in the effort to
Yeah.
to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think like with any organization, if you put in a bit of that effort, you get paid back tenfold.
Definitely. The first step is the hardest thing. Just going there for the first time.
Yeah.
I've been in Brampton for the 13 years, I think. That's
Yeah.
the first time I went was like 6, 7 months ago. So
Yeah.
maybe the first step is the hardest and everything else is like falls into the place
Everyone
itself.
is super friendly, super
Yeah.
welcoming. There are tons of other
Mm-hmm.
people that are there on their own for the first
Mm-hmm.
time. And then you just start building a relationship and come talk to me and
Mm-hmm.
other staff. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Definitely. So as a city of Brampton, what do you think needs to change this year? What's your biggest goal that you want to achieve in terms of BOW? How can BOW transcend to the next level?
Yeah. Well, I think like it's not even necessarily just about BOW. It's just like as an arts and culture community in Brampton, how can we get things to that sort of next
Uh-huh.
level? I think for our organization, I'll just say that we're sort of like, we talk about this year as almost a year of like strengthening our core. So
Uh-huh.
if we were going to the gym, we wouldn't be trying out new
Uh-huh.
equipment. It would be like, let's do a bunch of crunches. So I think just like we've grown so much over the years. So in 2021, we had about 500 people come out to things, and that was our first year.
Mm-hmm.
Just a staff of myself and Katie on our team.
Mm-hmm.
And then last year we had almost 6,000. So it's like in
Wow.
a couple of years, it's grown
Yeah.
exponentially. So this year, I'd say a lot of the programs were sort of just with yourself and other artist advisory group folks
Uh-huh.
looking at what we're doing. How can it be improved? How can it be strengthened?
Mhm.
I mean, we can't resist still coming up with new ideas and new things, but really
Yeah.
focusing on our organizational strength.
Uh-huh.
And that's a big thing for us this year. I think
Mhm.
also like continuing our advocacy efforts. So
Mhm.
this year, there's obviously a municipal election. How
Mhm.
is voting for art something that's considered, right? Like, how do we make sure that arts and culture isn't treated as a nice to have in Brampton and like an
It's a
add on,
must,
but is like
yeah.
a core economic driver that is
Mhm.
pushing the economy forward,
Mhm.
pushing tourism forward, pushing
Mhm.
our city forward?
Mhm.
How do we make sure that people are talking about that when they think about,
Uh-huh.
going into the ballot box as well, right?
Mhm.
An arts and culture center was in the plans for 2026 and got pushed back to 2028. How do we make sure that
Mhm.
people are aware of that
Yeah.
and fight to make sure that the arts and culture center gets built?
Mhm.
Yeah, and just in general, trying to make sure that Brampton artists have like healthier, happier,
Yeah,
successful careers.
definitely. So getting back to like what city gets, let's say I'm meeting an MP tomorrow. I don't
Hmm.
want to convince them like how does artists or art, if it's a must have in Brampton, how does that help the city? Like, what does city get in return?
Yeah.
Economical perspective or
Well,
mm,
I know, and it's one of those things that I think when people think about art, they just think about like the intangibles, like the nice to haves, which are all super important, right? So
uh-huh.
let's just acknowledge that for a second. That it is like amazing to go to see an exhibition and be moved by it,
Mhm,
emotionally, and it's how we tell our stories.
yeah,
It's how we share our stories. Again, it's
mhm,
how we like situate ourselves
mhm,
in the world, right? So like,
yeah,
so that is all like just as important as sort of the economic impact that I
uh-huh,
can speak to. But let's also remember that there is that economic impact, right? That for for every dollar that's invested in the arts, it
uh-huh,
puts $29 into the local economy.
that's great.
For every tourist that comes to an arts and culture event, they're spending about 3 times as much as a sports tourist.
Mhm,
So even if you really love hockey and you're like, hockey is super important, we really want that, to get supported in Brampton.
mhm,
That's great. But just so you know, the average person that's coming to the hockey game isn't spending nearly as much as the
yeah,
average person coming to see a concert or coming to see
mhm,
a show. Like art as a tourism driver, right? When you think about museums, I think
mhm,
often they can be these spaces that people find intimidating. But really, there could be something for everyone at a museum,
mhm,
right? Why can't that be something that you go to with your friends to check out a show and
mhm,
then go out to get something to eat or whatever it might be? Like I think an issue for the art world is just needing to make spaces a bit more inviting too, right?
uh-huh,
So often you go into a gallery and it's a very like white cube space, literally a very
uh-huh,
white sort of colonial space. Often you have somebody at the front desk that's kind of got their head down that doesn't look
mhm,
up at you, and so I think sometimes for people too, like they find that
mhm,
very uninviting, right? And I think
yeah,
that the art world, if it wants more broader support from the public, needs to make sure that it's making sure that everyone feels
yeah,
welcomed and invited, and that there are no stupid questions, right? Because I
uh-huh,
think sometimes too people don't want to go to a museum because they're worried about saying something stupid or
mhm,
looking stupid or not knowing the history about something, so they don't want to go because they're
mhm,
worried that, well, I don't understand that or I
mhm,
don't whatever. And I think like
right,
museums doing a better job and
mhm,
galleries and the art world of just saying like there are no dumb questions here. Ask what you
mhm,
like better to say it out loud and to talk about these sort of things, right?
mhm,
Um, and I think some museums are shifting that, and you can have a balance of both, right? So the
uh-huh,
AJO is going to have a big exhibition of like
mhm,
Beatles stuff,
yep,
and it's very easy to sort of say, oh well, it's just another Beatles show.
mhm,
Everyone's going to go to that. That's just for the general public, and kind of criticize the AJO say for that.
mhm,
Um, which you can understand, but also isn't it just great to get more people into museums
yeah,
and then maybe they see whatever generic
mhm,
pop show, but
yeah,
then go back or
mhm,
and check out something else, or they see something on the way out that interests them, right? Like I think it's just the art
yeah,
world can do better than sort of putting itself on this high horse.
yes.
And it's not going to help any artists by having that sort of like exclusivity sort of attitude about things.
So I actually have never been to an art museum ever.
Oh
So I
well,
think
let's
that's
go.
like the next thing I should do.
Yeah.
Was to,
Oh, I would love
yeah,
to go with you. Like
yeah,
that's so like,
definitely.
I mean, they're great
Uh-huh,
spaces to go to. And I'd love to
uh-huh,
take you to a museum if you want to go together
uh-huh.
sometime, right? Because
I
I think
think,
they're like, I mean, so let's just speak about like what a museum can be like. Like
uh-huh,
often there's a coffee shop in there, so it's
uh-huh,
great space to like go
yeah,
get a coffee. Great for dates.
uh-huh,
It's an amazing opportunity
yeah,
to. This is like why Michael would encourage people to go to museums.
yeah,
Coffee, there's always a place to go get a coffee.
mm,
Normally you can bring it around, sometimes you can't.
mhm,
Great space to like go get a coffee and then go look at things so you can talk about things, right?
mhm.
How often do you go on a date or hang out with a friend and you go see a movie or something, you don't talk to each other the whole time. You
Yeah,
check out the movie, you're like, okay, see you later, man. It's like, isn't it nice to actually walk
yeah,
around a space,
and
talk
talk.
about what you're seeing?
Right,
Also,
right.
how's your mom doing? How is this going?
Uh-huh,
Like, it's great for conversation. Obviously, to
uh-huh,
be obviously all the benefits of like actually seeing art, being inspired by it.
uh-huh,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, and being moved by what you're looking at, be able to
Mhm,
talk about it with somebody else, and who knows where that conversation can
mhm,
lead to, right? Obviously, just typically like beautiful spaces to be in, full of
yeah,
light,
mhm,
bright. If you care about getting good pictures for your Instagram, normally you can get
yeah,
great photos
definitely.
of yourself in a
Uh-huh,
museum looking at something
yeah,
pensive.
mhm,
So, but yeah, but just typically too, it's like they're interesting spaces to be in. There's lots of
mhm,
other like-minded people who are
mhm,
curious about,
mhm,
what's in front of them. There's a gift shop. Do
mhm,
some shopping. Like,
uh-huh.
again,
A dumb
yeah,
question that like ignorant question.
no,
Does
no,
Brampton have a museum, like art museum?
it does. I mean, so Brampton. doesn't have its own art museum, unfortunately. It has something called the Peel Art Museum and Archives, PAMA.
Oh yeah, I've
That's
heard about that.
downtown,
Yeah.
so you've heard of it. But yeah, for a city of this size, it is a shame that we don't have a dedicated art museum or a dedicated arts and culture center, as we're speaking about. You know, there are much smaller municipalities that have much bigger infrastructure and facilities for the art. And wouldn't it be amazing for Brampton to have its own
Yeah.
museum that tells Brampton stories, you know, that you could go and see, see your community reflected and interpreted in different ways.
Definitely.
Should have many museums, you know, like not just one either, right? Like again,
Yeah.
if you're comparing it to other cities, it's like there's a number of different museums, all, you know, again, that you can tailor to specific interests or whatever it might be. But
Yeah. Yeah, I think it needs to be like more inviting in a sense that for a younger generation, and there needs like even the organization, maybe my organization, BOW or anyone.
yeah,
If a younger person goes there, they want to see like other young people that are also participating in arts.
yeah,
If the admin team or the entire team is built up of people that are not diverse or are
Yeah.
of like 40, 50, 60 years old,
for sure.
they're probably not gonna like relate too much. I think younger generation also needs to take that action and you know,
Yeah, but I think you're right too that museums and institutions and theaters need to, you know, again, kind of get off this high horse of like, well, how come people aren't coming to us? How come they don't realize how important we are and how amazing we are? And it's like, well, have you shown that, or have you opened the door? Have you made it like financially feasible, right? Because for some people too, it's like if you only have $20, are you going to spend it going to a museum that you don't know if you're going to like? Is it going to be worth it? Is the art going to be good? Or so again, I think some institutions are doing a good job of making it very like open or free as much as possible, or like having different levels of membership. You know, I think it's very short-sighted for a theater or an organization to not be thinking about what comes next, right? So when you have these organizations or these spaces that are very literally full of old white people, they're all going to die. And you need to be planning for who comes next, right? And that next wave. And I think that you see that in some organizations, like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because literally all these folks won't be around in 10 years. And if you're not already building up that next audience, like you're in big trouble, right? And again, how do you do that? By welcoming folks in and involving them in what's on the stage or on the walls, so that people see themselves reflected and then are more interested in being there, right? But I think you really need to be thinking ahead about that, you know?
Yeah, and in terms of BOW, getting back to the BOW, like a lot of people think that being or practicing art is very expensive, or they won't do it because they don't have anyone to do it with. You need a community. So even the Open Studio Day, I think, is very helpful for
Yeah.
someone that is lacking equipment or the space, just to come there and start out with like, you know, there's a community there. You will see like like-minded people. I haven't been to the Open Studio Day yet, but I think
Yeah.
that will come in the future for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure.
Yeah,
And it is just, again, an opportunity for people to come. So our open studio is the last Wednesday of every month. We basically turn our office into a giant shared studio from 12 o'clock in the afternoon to 8 o'clock at night. And normally it lingers on past then. But yeah, tons of free equipment, a free recording studio, art supplies, green screen, like sort of toys, right, for artists to use together, and a bunch of art supplies. But yeah, I think for many people, there's this also idea that the equipment and the supplies are expensive, and some can be, but you can also get a set of, you know, pencils at the dollar store. And again, I think that sometimes it's like, oh, well, those can't possibly be good enough pencils, because it's, you know, again, the art world sort of putting itself on this, well, you need the most expensive pencils and you have this quality of paper, and you're going to get people that say things like that to you. Oh, well, you shouldn't be using that kind of X, Y, Z, you know, but they're wrong. And it's like, ultimately, you can start somewhere and then you can work your way up too. And, you know, again, I don't think that many of the most famous artists in the world are being snobby about what paint is being used. It's more about how you use it. So, yeah, I think.
But also in terms of, I think you don't necessarily have to do art to make it a career.
No.
You don't really have to be like that. Like, you know, you can't just, you know, you shouldn't leave your creative self just because it's not a career.
It's totally okay to make like a bunch of amazing paintings throughout your life and have no interest in selling them and making money off of them, or even sharing them, you know, like if you want to just like make art and it's just for you and it's a very personal thing, that's okay too, right? It doesn't lessen the value whatsoever if you're making art or music or a poem
You're
or a
right.
screenplay or any of these other things just for yourself, you know? And like that's still again the benefits that come from creating art, from making it. Um, for just for yourself and to have like a well-rounded life, right? Like if
Yeah.
everyone's life is just like work, home,
Yeah.
Netflix, bed, work, home, Netflix, bed, work, home, Netflix,
Yeah.
bed, work, home, you know, like that's okay if
Yeah.
that's some of that.
Hmm.
But isn't it nice to also have a couple
Hmm.
other things in there?
Yeah. I think it's the hustle culture too, right? If you're not making money, that's not a good thing to do. Like everybody thinks about that perspective. No, you need to
Hmm.
monetize every single hobby that you have. If you can monetize it, leave it. That's like
Yeah, for
the hustle
sure. And I
culture that's
think
going
that's
out there. Yeah.
like yeah, what happened to hobbies, right? Like
Yeah,
what
that
happened to just the
exactly.
idea of doing
Doing
something kind of for fun
yeah.
that is just for you or
Hmm.
just for you and some friends and it
Yeah.
isn't about I'm going to try and
Hmm.
put this on Etsy or I need
Yeah.
an Instagram account for it
Hmm.
or I need a, you know, like I think there is just sort of this we've gotten into this trap.
The social media trap, I
Social
think.
media trap,
Yeah.
like capitalism, like we
Yeah.
can go down in the wormhole here, right? Of
Yeah.
just like the systems that be that make the world
Hmm.
the way it is. But
Hmm.
if you can try and at least pause and say like, wait, do I really have to
Yeah.
try and monetize it? If you want to, great. But
Hmm.
yeah, but I think there's that, and I think that stops some people from doing it. They're like, well, if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna have to set up X, Y, Z, and make sure I photograph it. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
maybe just start making things,
Hmm.
and then
That's me as well, I think. Like I think a lot of people can actually relate to this that let's say and they sway away from their real personality in order to monetize it too. If I want to make this art, I can't do it because it's not gonna sell. Okay, I'm
yeah,
gonna do this one instead because this sells, but I'm not gonna get self-fulfillment.
yeah,
But they will still prefer that. So and
for
they end
sure,
up leaving their actual true self. In terms of music too. A positive music or the one that you really, really want to put it out there might
yeah,
not get views or shares or something,
yeah.
but the one that you don't want to do will get views. And then you end up leaving that real, meaningful part of you and just start
Yeah.
towards monetizing it.
At very least, I would say, like, try and do both, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, if you need to do one or
Yeah.
two things that are more commercial that
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna help support your income, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
also understand for some people, it's like, well, I have to make a certain type of
Yeah.
art because
Mm-hmm.
it is selling and it's doing well, and that's how I have my livelihood. But
Mm-hmm.
there's just trying to also then keep doing the weird,
Yeah.
good, quirky
Yeah.
stuff that maybe is less commercial.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even if you have to. And I've experienced that in my practice too, where I
Mm-hmm.
had, hit a point where I was making certain sculptures that I just knew how to make them, that I could do it with my eyes
Uh-huh.
closed and knew that people liked them and they'd sell.
Uh-huh.
But then I hit a point where I was just like, okay, well then if like where I wasn't finding joy in it, I wasn't
Uh-huh.
finding that magic in it because it just became,
Mm-hmm.
uh, just so uh, automated in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of ways.
Do you have like an at-home studio too? Like, do you practice at home or do you like go to somewhere like and paint and like?
I don't at the moment.
Uh-huh.
I right now have just like my kitchen table that
I
I
see, I
will
see, I
like
see.
get paper and pens out
Uh-huh.
at and then clean up after myself.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so I would really like to get one going again soon. I think
Mm-hmm.
like it's so important to have a studio
Studio or
as an
something.
artist, and again, it can be shared. Like we offer
Mm-hmm.
shared studio
Yeah.
spaces. This feels like I'm plugging them now. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not, but just to mention, like
Mm-hmm.
we have shared studio spaces that you can access for $75 a month, or your own private studio for $300 a month. You're not going to find anything more affordable than that
100%.
anywhere around. Um, but part of the value of a studio and making that sort of investment is a dedicated place to go and make your work. So when I
Mm-hmm.
have had the most success
Yeah.
in my art and have been most prolific and made the most is when I had a place to go to
Mm-hmm.
do all of that and then also to shut the door and like walk away, right? And also
Yeah.
be able to
Turn
carve out
that
that
switch
time.
off. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and by being intentional with your time and your energy and saying I'm going there
Mm-hmm.
to work on my paintings for 2 hours and then I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to call it quits and go home. Like you get so much more done in that
Yeah.
dedicated sort of carved out
No
literal
doubt.
sort of space and time.
Space definitely matters. It like changes the entire mood. You get into that zone and you start creating.
Yeah, I mean we do an annual survey every year, and
Yeah.
every year the number one thing that people ask for in
Space.
Brampton is space.
Space.
Like paid opportunities is a close second,
Yeah.
but even more than that, it's like actually I want space
Uh-huh.
to like call my own, to
Yeah.
meet other artists, to make it, and that's why the Arts and Culture Center is so important in Brampton.
Yeah.
Just more places for artists to gather and to make and share their work.
Space is usually the biggest talk in I think the town halls as well. Everybody's talking about like we need more space. I go to Toronto to do this.
For
Let me do it
sure.
in Brampton. Yeah.
Yeah,
Space
it's
is
hard
definitely
to
the
kind of
biggest
get
thing.
away from it, and I think
Uh-huh.
sometimes people, wonder like, oh, do you really need more? And
Uh-huh.
it's like, well, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, not nearly enough. Like we're well behind,
Mm-hmm.
other municipalities when it comes to space, and I think we've managed to
Mm-hmm.
make huge strides in that, but
Mhm.
it's still like chipping away at a
Mhm.
mammoth issue.
Yeah.
Uh,
And just like a random suggestion, I think to bow as well, maybe the younger generation does want to monetize art. Like I think most of the
mhm.
people they still want to make money.
Yeah,
So being a good artist and making money, they still need marketing skills most likely. Maybe like having like a marketing boot camp for artists
yeah.
specifically, or teaching them how to sell art, how to create this. That would be, I think, a really good
For
thing.
sure. Yeah, we
Yeah.
have done some of those and
Uh
they are
huh.
super popular because
Yeah.
to your point, I think for many folks,
Uh huh.
they're just like, I do want to
Uh
make
huh.
sure I'm putting this out there in a certain way or whatever it might be. And I think, yeah, for many artists too, especially younger ones, they're doing a few different things
Uh
and seeing
huh.
what sticks too, right?
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
marketing one is great because they can sort of say,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm doing poems, I'm doing paintings,
Yeah.
and I'm rapping,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to get them all out in there into the world. Like, what's
Mm-hmm.
the best way to do it? And it's not the same for all of them, right? Like, if
Yeah.
you're trying to become a successful musician, a marketing strategy or
Yeah.
monetizing it is very different
Mm-hmm.
than it is for visual arts.
Mm-hmm.
And also, how do you do that in the most smart way
Yeah.
possible, too, right? Like, if you're only getting zero point zero zero
Mm-hmm.
zero 0.0001 cents
Yeah.
a stream on
That's also
Spotify,
it is.
is that where you want to put your
Uh-huh.
effort if it is about making money, right? Or are you
Definitely.
smarter putting it on Tidal or something else where you're
Mm-hmm.
going to get more sort of money, frankly.
Definitely. So thank you for your time, Michael. It was great having this conversation. And just to end things off here, what's the one message? Because it starts at home. Parents play a big role in how the kids are going to be, in their art practice, art, creativity, and everything. What's your one message to the parents and the teachers of Brampton as well? I think teachers play a big role as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like try and put yourself in the kids' shoes and what do they deserve to hear or should they hear from you and I really encourage folks to let the next generation do whatever they want to do with their lives and their careers. And if that means going down the arts and culture path, like that can be an amazing,
Hmm.
rewarding, fulfilling, financially smart choice. And it's not true to believe that it can be anything other than that, and that you can make just as much money being an artist as you do an accountant or a lawyer or an engineer, and that it can be a really amazing career choice. So don't get tricked into thinking otherwise.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and again, whether no matter what path they want to take, I would just tell folks to be encouraging and to at least give it a shot, so that
Mhm.
there's no regret.
Definitely. And I think the parents should bring their kids to Bao, like to just initiate
Hmm.
that. That's like, and the parents should come and see like there's a community here in Brampton
For
that
sure.
actually offers a lot of things. There's so many things that Bao offers, and I think that's the only organization we have in Brampton that is doing this.
That's really doing sort of
Yeah.
this the what we're doing, and we can also connect you with other groups that
Yeah.
are doing other things too, right? Like
Hmm.
I think that's one of my favorite things about my role is being a connector to other groups and saying,
Uh-huh.
well, we serve so many different creative disciplines, but if you really like classical music, let's
Uh-huh.
introduce you to the Rose Orchestra. Or if you
Yeah.
really like still life painting, there's a group called Visual Arts Brampton that maybe you'd be
Hmm.
interested in. Or if you really like ceramics, there's a group called Happy Hand Studio where you can do ceramic work.
Hmm.
Like being that sort of introduction to other groups. But yeah, I think certainly for parents, like come to our space, check things out. We have a kids area too, which I
Hmm.
really appreciate as a parent myself, right? That we have an area where your kid can sit, can make art, can do whatever, and you can still participate in
Yeah.
the workshop that we're doing. Because I
Definitely.
also think that's also a reality too for folks, right? Is
Hmm.
they would like to take a grant writing workshop, but it's like,
Hmm.
oh,
Have
I
kids.
have kids. What do I do with them? It's like, well, at least at Bow, you can bring them along
Hmm.
and we'll keep them entertained while you learn and further your career.
Hmm. So how do they get started? Where can they reach out to you, your team, and the Instagram account, all that?
Yeah, so our website is just bramptonartsorg.ca. Check that out. On socials, we're just BAO Brampton. My email, which I'm happy to share, is just Michael, Michael, Michael at bramptonartsorg.ca. Shoot us an email and yeah, sign up to our newsletter, which is on our website. Follow us on all the socials and come on out.
Perfect. So thank you very much again for your time. And thank you for listening, guys. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
having
much.
me.